Welcome to the Butler Beat. I'm Mary Algier. After more than 40 years as a priest and the last few here at Butler, Father Jeff Godecker will retire from his position as the chaplain of the Butler Catholic community. Father Jeff is in the studio today to talk about his time at Butler. Well, thanks for coming by today, Father Jeff.
You're welcome, Mary.
So you're getting ready to retire as BCC chaplain. What are your plans for after this year?
On the long term, what I usually say is I'm retiring from responsibility. I'm retiring from, I don't want to be in charge of anything. But I still like doing ministry, so I'll probably help out in parishes. I'm going to come back to Butler for Mass on Sundays.
Okay.
And I may do some work for one of our retreat houses. So that's the long term. The short term, I'm going to do some traveling this summer, visit some friends in South and North Carolina. And then I'm taking a 2-month trip west. Visit family and some friends and come back and we'll see what happens.
So what made you decide to retire from responsibility?
I'm getting tired of it. I mean, I've been doing it for 44 years, and I do have a physical fatigue that I didn't used to have, and campus ministry can be quite demanding at times. I mean, there are periods where it's not very intense, and there are periods where it's really intense, and I just find myself worn out. So it's really time to give it up.
Okay. Well, you've been a priest for 44 years. You spent the last few at Butler. Well, where were you before you came to Butler?
I was the pastor at Immaculate Heart of Mary at 57th and Central here in town for 12 years. Really enjoyed that ministry, had a great relationship with the parishioners there. Did lots of interesting things, including a mission that we founded in Honduras. And still love that assignment a lot.
All right, well, you were a teacher for a while too, weren't you?
I did. I taught for 10 years, and I really didn't want to teach. The Archbishop said, teach, and I said I didn't want to teach, and he said, well, teach anyway. And when I got there, I found out I was a little better at it than I thought it was going to be, and I liked it a lot more than I thought it would be. So out of the 44 years, I've ended up 30 years in educationally related ministries, college, high school, diocesan office a couple times, and it's been really fun. And sometimes, you know, you have to listen to what somebody else says you ought to do.
Okay. Well, how is being a priest in a college community different than being the pastor at Immaculate Heart, per se?
I always say that college is mission territory. It's much more focused. That's the best thing about college ministry is that you've really only got one homogenous group of people to deal with, namely college students. I think you have to be out a lot more. When you're in a parish, people tend to come to you. I think when you're on a college campus, you have to be out a lot more. You have to be where students are.
Okay. Have you noticed, what changes have you seen with students and religion in the past few years, if any?
Well, you know, I was at Butler once before, and comparing the 80s to now, the biggest change is everything is more intense. I think the problems and the challenges are the same, but because there is so much more knowledge needed in this century versus the 80s, the academic pursuit, I think, again, is just significantly more intense. People's lives are busier. There are many more distractions. And of course, back in the 80s, there was not social media. There was no internet. Cell phones were just coming into existence. So all of that has just made student life, I think, very complex and, again, very challenging for them.
Okay. Well, tying that back into the BCC, how has the BCC tried to combat that and with busy students?
Well, first of all, I don't think we try to combat it. I hope we try to work with it. I challenge students a lot about making sure that they take moments of quiet. I think one of the best things that we've done since I've been here is each year we've had what we call a tech fast, where students agree for a 24-hour period to give up everything tech-wise, except those things that are needed for academics. And the purpose is not to diss technology. The purpose is, can you take a look at how technology affects you? Can you take a look at what technology might be doing to you? And usually we finish those days with a supper, and the comments are really interesting. And we've had a number of students say it was one of the best days they've ever had here on campus, just because it was more quiet and they weren't as easily distracted and they could concentrate better. And some of them said they thought they were going to have a nervous breakdown when they got started, but as the day went on, they found themselves more comfortable. Now, have they changed the way they use technology? Probably not, but at least they have some awareness. And you know, even the big companies like Yahoo and Google and a number of those places are challenging their workers to turn their electronics off from time to time and just be right here, right now. Okay. And I actually, as I think about what we've accomplished at BCC, that's one of my favorites.
All right. Well, what gave rise to the Tech Fast, aside from, did you get the idea from Google?
Well, actually, I think we started doing it before Google started doing it. I just listening to students and listening to the again, almost sometimes panic when it gets to be this time of the year, for example, and again, suggesting ways in which, you know, they can lessen that stress by looking at the way they use their technology. Some of the ways I know, some of the ways in which I recognize this in students is I recognize this in myself. So I get easily distracted by my phone, my iPad, my computer, the internet, the whole thing. I don't think I'm a whole lot different than students. I probably don't use it quite as much. I don't spend hours on Facebook, for example. That's the other thing. I think students often complain that they don't have enough time, but sometimes I think that's because, again, they don't analyze how they're using their time. They don't, you know, I don't have any time, and yet that student is maybe spending 2 or 3 hours a day surfing the net or being on Facebook. You know, all they'd have to do is cut that down a little to find a little more time.
Yeah, I've never spent too much time on Facebook. So tying into that a little bit, the BCC operates from the Center for Faith and Vocation. What kinds of things do the BCC and the CFV provide for students?
I think we provide a place for students to come and have a good listening ear. Students that are questioning their faith, students that are struggling with their faith, students that have no faith, students that are simply looking for meaning and purpose in their life. They may call themselves spiritual but not religious. I think we're open to all of those students. And the staff of the CFB, as well as the various campus ministers on campus, try to provide a safe place where they can talk about faith if they want. Often, I think faith on campus, they may not really feel safe elsewhere talking about it. Plus, I think we provide community. I think we provide prayer and service opportunities. And again, provide some quote religious experts and people who have thought about this. And I think we do so gently. One of the nicest things about the CFV is we're not really out to convert anybody. I'm not out to convert anybody. I'll help anybody that wants to explore, where they're at with faith, where they want to go with faith. And I see that as my main purpose. My main purpose is really as a listener and as a guide.
And do you often get a lot of students who have questions?
It comes and goes. This time of the year, everybody's into something else, but I would say that Again, there's probably, between the people, the campus ministers on campus and Judy and Marguerite, there's a couple dozen students a week who come through the center for some kind of advice. And some of it may just be, the normal everyday human problems that college students run into. And other times it's really some serious faith matters.
All right. Well, going back to your time specifically here at the BCC, what are some of your favorite memories of Butler?
Well, of course, there's the two Final Fours. I mean, you kind of got to start with those. My favorite times are the times that I've spent with individual students and our small groups. I love that part of the ministry. But our Sunday masses, which are filled with really good music, I like being there because, as compared sometimes to congregations, parishes, everybody's there because they want to be. And a lot of times I'll come in pretty fatigued because I'll have had a couple early morning masses. I come in fatigued and I leave energized by that group. For 2 years I took two groups of students to Honduras. That still remains a favorite ministry of mine as well.
Is the Honduras ministry tied to when you started at Immaculate Heart?
Yeah,
or is it separate?
we're going the same place that Immaculate Heart goes.
All right. Well, you mentioned that the Tech Fast is your favorite thing, that you're probably the thing that you're most proud of. Is there anything else that you really sticks out in your brain?
Yeah, a couple things. The Student Leadership Council, the Student Leadership Team is what we call it. That's growing significantly. It's just a great bunch of students, and I've really enjoyed working with those students. They're talented. They're really dedicated to their faith. There's an interesting interchange that happens. I think, again, like every religion today, there's the very conservative and there's the very liberal, and so at that table we have both of those groups represented, and they get along quite well. And there's none of this kind of jabbing at each other, which seems to so often happen in our culture between people on the conservative side and people on the liberal side. I love it when people can be together and understand that there's going to be differences of opinion.
All right. What have you learned from your time as chaplain for BCC, and what advice would you give to the next director?
What have I learned? Well, what I've learned from students and my teaching and the students here, is that life is a lifelong growing process. And I love being part of the growth of students. That's probably been, again, one of the most satisfying things to me. I don't even have to really, in many ways, I don't think I'm even the cause of that growth. It's just being a witness to that growth and, periodically helping. And I recognize that that's something that goes on for a whole lifetime. It goes on for me. We talk about adolescence, for example, as being a time of really intense growth. Well, what I'm discovering now is that being 70, there is a whole nother adjustment that comes that's not totally unlike adolescence in the sense of who am I now that I'm 70? Who am I now that I am going to be retired? Who am I as I grow old? I think that's, I begin to see some of those same questions that adolescents and young adults such as yourselves, and the questions don't go away. And again, I learned so much from students. I learned so much from students, particularly their dedication. I mean, I think the Butler students that I come in contact with are very dedicated to their careers, very dedicated to their majors. They work really hard, sometimes too hard, and that inspires me, and that reminds me not only to be thankful for that youthful enthusiasm, but to keep a piece of that enthusiasm as I grow old.
All right, well, thank you so much, Father Jeff.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Father Jeff, thank you for being my guest today. On our next segment of the Butler Beat, State Representative Christina Hale will be JoJo Gentry's guest to talk about issues in the Indiana General Assembly.
Thank you for joining me on the Butler Beat. I'm JoJo Gentry. My guest today is State Representative Christina Hale of Indianapolis. The latest session of the Indiana General Assembly will be ending in less than 2 weeks. Representative Hale will be talking with me about the latest issues before the state legislature. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
So first of all, you represent District 87, which consists of portions of Boone, Hamilton, and Marion counties. Tell me.
Actually, it doesn't. We've been redistricted. So the borders are a little bit different, and they're entirely contained within Marion County now, which is a big change.
Oh, and when did that change?
Just this year. So 96th Street is the northerly border, and then Spring Mill Road to Hague Road, and it goes down to about 50th Street. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about why you decided to become a state representative.
Well, I'd been active in politics as a volunteer, as a young person, and really drifted away from that in my career. I had been working in economic development and on the staff of Governor Frank O'Bannon years ago. But for about the past 10 years, I've been working for Kiwanis International, which is a global service organization headquartered here in Indianapolis. And I just helped to launch a project to eliminate maternal and neonatal tetanus in the world. And to be perfectly honest, I was out in the rice paddies in Cambodia with a lot of UNICEF staff working on vaccinating women and children, and looking around realizing that everyone there was either a doctor, had some specialized knowledge and really needed to be there. And my personal belief's always been that the most active, engaged communities are the ones where people are actually good citizens and doing something in their own backyard, so to speak. And I thought, what am I doing here? And since that time, I'd really been looking for a way to contribute to my own community here, but also bring some of the experience and knowledge of working in the wider world to Indianapolis as well.
And you're a lifelong Hoosier, and you were telling me you've been traveling all around the world. So tell me a little bit about your experiences involving community and economic development.
Sure. As I said years ago, I worked on the Kernan O'Bannon staff trying to attract business and investment from overseas here in Indiana. We also, at the time, were trying to recruit organizations like the NCAA to headquarter here, which we did very successfully. But since that time, of course, there's been a recession. But in my role as legislator, I am ranking minority member on commerce, economic development, and small business, and have taken an active interest in things such as pursuing the opportunity for voters to consider a referendum on bringing mass transit here to Indianapolis, and other things to set us on a path moving forward.
So how important of an issue is bringing mass transit to Indianapolis to you?
Out on the campaign trail, and I'm a freshman, and this is my first term, but I knocked on close to 30,000 doors, talking to all kinds of people, from young parents to older established people who have really invested in our community over their lifetimes. And a concern I have is that we've not been planning strategically or even really thinking about where Indianapolis needs to be in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. And I really want to cultivate a community where people like you, young professionals, want to live, and also so that we can attract the best and brightest from other places to Indiana as well. The Indiana Chamber cites as their top priority for the next 20 years is talent, which is the cultivation of talent, the acquisition, and just really that kind of means making sure the best and brightest want to live here, and part of that is urban mobility.
So what have you seen works and doesn't work with competing nations?
That's a really good question. As a young mother, I moved to the United Kingdom with my son, and this is an example of something that was working. I had actually kind of struggled to send him to full-day kindergarten. It was expensive. It wasn't something we had in Indiana. The following year, we were in the United Kingdom, and his teacher pulled me aside and said, I don't know what to do with your son. His reading's at the top of the class. His writing and math is non-existent. And he had to spend several months working with children that didn't even speak any English at all, trying to catch up. And I learned they start full-time. Their kindergarten is full-time at age 4. So they're learning to read and write at the same time, which we haven't been doing, and also math. They were quite a bit ahead of my son, who had been in full-time, but only at age 5. That's working. And we also know enough about brain science and brain development that we need to get kids learning to read until they're 8, and then reading to learn after that time. And compulsory education in Indiana doesn't even begin until age 7. So if we have kids that have never been in a structured instructional setting trying to learn to raise their hand and stand in line, let alone learn to read at 7, they're not going to be readers by 8. And that's something that's working other places, other countries, whether it's South Korea, Finland, or Switzerland. They know getting kids up to speed at a younger age is so important, and that's something that I would like to drive in our state legislature, you know, to do better by our young children and our students here.
So tell me how you think that providing like full-day kindergarten to the United States would benefit students in the future.
Well, once again, if we can get kids learning to read when they're younger, so they're teed up to be reading to learn after age 8. There's a critical reading test in 3rd grade, which is about that age. And we've committed as a state that everyone needs to be a reader by grade 3, and we can project and through data, surveys, all kinds of studies will tell us that if you're not a reader by grade 3, your chances of not being a high school graduate are exponentially larger. If you're not a high school graduate, you're much less likely to be employed in the legitimate economy, that your life may not unfold in the way that we would hope our sons and daughters' lives would. And investing on the front end, I think giving people the chance to be successful, productive citizens, students, whatever career pathway they choose, I think is the right thing to do.
So coming from a Purdue graduate yourself, which is a public institution, how would you like to see higher education become more affordable?
Actually, one bill that I've co-authored this year I'm very excited about, it's called the EARN program, and what it will do for students that are qualifying for work-study, that if it passes, and I think it's about to, it will allow private businesses, primarily small businesses, but small to medium size, to access federal work-study dollars. If they pay for half of the federal minimum wage, that our state will match the other half, so that we can offer students paid internships in their field of choice to give them that first crack at building a resume and experience in their field. You know, rather than hiring someone to just work in a cafeteria or do landscaping, let's get them working in their field, getting experience, building those first relationships in an employment setting that are critical to leading towards that first job.
So do you believe making higher education more affordable would decrease unemployment in the state of Indiana?
Ultimately, perhaps yes. I mean, that's a long-term strategy, and here I am, the mother of a college student, and I'm still paying my student loans myself. That said, I do think it's a good investment, but I think a focus I'd like to take on for next year is so many of our students, once they get to college, higher ed, are still taking remedial classes. So why should people be paying for credits that won't even count towards graduation or count towards their, you know, their diploma? I think that's a waste of money. We need to better prepare students before they get there so that the classes that they're paying for really count.
So what are some ways in which that unemployment rates can be decreased?
Well, a problem we have right now is for every person who's on unemployment in Indiana today, there are 2.4 jobs that are vacant that we can't fill. So we have more than 2 jobs per person on unemployment, but there's a disconnect between the way we prepare people to work, or frankly, the way we've not prepared people to go to work, and job openings that we have. And what we need to do is make sure that we better align preparation with the fields and the different jobs that Indiana is going to have to offer, once again today, in 5 years, in 10 years. And we need to be looking out so that we have the workforce ready to go when the time comes.
And according to HailYes.com, which I have to admit is a very catchy campaign slogan.
Thank you.
You said you ran because you noticed that things in the state legislature have been contentious and not moving forward. So what were some of the things you were seeing that were not moving forward?
Well, over the past couple of years, I think the issue that was in the news, and certainly people had on their minds, was the walkout, the right to work issue. My caucus walked out and stayed in Illinois and protested, and we had just a lot of anger, and that's in the past. I'm very glad to hear that. I'm glad to have it be so, that right to work is here, so it's time to rebuild those bridges and move forward. And I have to say, everyone on both sides of the aisle have just been very generous and gracious. All the bills that I have been able to put through are co-authored with Republicans in a really collaborative, I think, kind of smart way.
Mm-hmm. So if you could change one thing about the state legislature, what would it be?
I would still like to see a little bit, I would like to see the legislature reflect Indiana a little bit better than it does. When I get pages in, and usually they're at high school age, 13 or older, I try to take them around to look at some of the photos that we have around of former legislatures that have been composed over the years here in Indiana, and they look really old and really not diverse, and certainly a lot of men and not many people from different backgrounds. And if I could change one thing, the State House would look a little bit more like we look in Indiana.
Well, Representative Hale, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for joining us on the Butler Beat. I'm JoJo Gentry.